Fortnite season is almost over, and you know what that means. It's time for the Blitzblock seasonal review. And by seasonal, I mean like one time, because I sort of forgot to do it for the OG season. Look, okay, there wasn't a lot of stuff added, so I mean, like, what was I really reviewing, you know? Like, just Chapter 1? That's a video for another day. For right now, we're reviewing Fortnite Chapter 5, Season 1. If you're new to these tier lists, basically I'm going to go through all of the stuff that was added this season and just sort of give my ranking on them. As you can see, we have rankings here of S, Great, Decent, Bad, and Vault Please. I'm going to go through all of the new changes, including the weapons, the events, the new items, the new map, the battle pass, the new game modes, and just sort of rate them on this scale and see how they compare to each other, and then also how they compare to things from other seasons. Jumping right into it here, we've got the new map. And I'll tell you what, this map is pretty great. I was actually one of the people who was sort of a fan of the Chapter 4 map. I know a lot of people didn't really like it, but I thought it was honestly really good. Especially the Season 4 version with all of like the modern houses. I really liked the vibes of that season. Except for the jungle. Don't think I'm like a jungle supporter over here. I absolutely despise the jungle. I'm with everyone on that. That was one of the worst seasons ever. But I do believe that the rest of the Chapter 4 map was actually pretty decent. And this map I sort of have similar feelings about. Like, it's really well designed, I feel like. I love all like the open plain areas, and the mountains are pretty cool, except when the zone pulls up them and you die because you had no mobility. The POIs are all pretty balanced, and they all have a pretty good flow to them as well. The one thing I will say I don't like is the European like theme of everything. Not to say the theme is bad, but just like all the POIs, or like a good chunk of them, look pretty much exactly the same. Like Grand Glacier and Lavish Lair are very different, but they also look exactly the same. Snooty Steps and Riviera. I still don't know how to say that, but those two POIs look pretty much exactly the same, to where I've literally dropped at Ritzy thinking I was going to Snooty. Like, that has actually happened. My favorite of the new POIs is probably Grand Glacier, because that's where me and my friends have been dropping pretty much every single day for the last month. I haven't really been attached to any of the new POIs yet. Like, they all just seem kind of like good, but nothing is like exceptional in my opinion. Overall, I do love the new map. It flows pretty well. It's a pretty big change from last season where we had the Chapter 1 map. I'm going to chuck the new map into the great tier. I don't think it's like the best map we've ever had by far. In my opinion, that's the Chapter 2 map, but it's a great map and I'm looking forward to a year on it. Pray for more than 1 year, by the way, but spoiler alert, that's probably not going to happen, unfortunately. Next up, we have the Battle Pass, and I thought this Battle Pass was pretty good. It is definitely more memorable than the Season 4 Battle Pass, because I remember when I was making that review, I literally could not remember the names of like any of the skins. Like Kabe Lame, or Kabe Lame, I don't know how to say his name, but he was in that Battle Pass, and I kind of forgot he was in that Battle Pass, even though he was like the main attraction of that Battle Pass. So it just really wasn't that great. But in this one, you have Peter Griffin, obviously, which is pretty sick. You have Jones, like Vengeful Jonesy or something is his name. He's pretty cool. I like Hope. I think Hope's a really great skin. And all the other skins that I'm not thinking of right now, they're all pretty good. There's no like bad skins in this Battle Pass, I wouldn't say. Unless there's one I'm just forgetting. Then again, if I'm forgetting the names of the other ones, that kind of implies that they're not memorable, which means they're bad. So maybe it's like not actually that great of a Battle Pass, but I'm gonna chuck it into the great tier anyway, just because I feel like it's a pretty great Battle Pass to start off the chapter, and I can't think of any bad skins off the top of my head. All right, moving into the weapons here, we've got the Hammer Pump Shotgun. So this is the Pump Shotgun clone of Chapter 5. We pretty much get one every chapter. I don't know why we can't just like have the old ones, but I guess it spices the game up. This is pretty much your slow firing shotgun in the season that is going to be ideal for like jump shots and build battles most of the time. I think it's pretty well balanced. It does feel like I hit a lot more 20s and 30s with this gun than most of the other pump shotguns in the game. I think that's because it has like a tighter reticle on it, and especially with like the attachments you can put laser sight, which makes it even harder to hit like those big shots sometimes. But overall, it's a pretty great shotgun. It's my preferred shotgun this season over the Frenzy shotgun. I wouldn't say it's overpowered or anything by any means, but I would chuck it into the bottom of great tier here because it's definitely a pretty good shotgun. It's obviously not better than like the OG pump shotgun or anything, but for what it's meant to do, it's a pretty good weapon. Next up, we have the Frenzy Auto Shotgun, and I think it's a pretty general opinion that people hate this gun. It's extremely deadly in a box, and especially with the Mythic, it will hit consistent like 70s and it fires like, I don't know, 2 or 3 bullets per second. It's kind of ridiculous. Personally, I really hate this gun because the slow reload just completely kills the flow of it. It takes like upwards of 5 seconds to reload. Even on the upper rarities, it's just kind of absurd. So like if you use your entire clip and you're in like a stressful endgame or something, you're pretty much just kind of boned unless you can find a good 5 seconds to just sit in a box and reload your gun. I don't play much zero build, and I'm sure this is pretty deadly in zero build. It's probably better than the hammer pump in zero build specifically, just because of how, zero build works, where, you can't build. I'm going to put it into great tier as well, just because I think it is a great gun. I just personally don't like it, so I'm going to put the hammer pump over it. But I know this is a very deadly weapon in the hands of some less skilled players, if I can say that without getting canceled. The Thunder Burst SMG. So this thing I didn't really like towards the start of the season. Burst guns are kind of always like hit or miss, whether they're good or bad, and most of the time they're pretty bad, with the rare exception being like the AUG. But this gun, it's pretty good, especially when you put the laser sight and some other attachments. I don't even remember the names of attachments in this game, but laser sight attachment on this gun makes it pretty much a straight laser where it just beams kids. So it's definitely a pretty good gun. I'm going to chuck it up here between the hammer pump and the frenzy shotgun. It's a very solid weapon. It definitely outshines the next SMG coming up here, so that's why I'm going to put it in this tier. I wouldn't call it overpowered or anything. I think it's a pretty well balanced, just good SMG that's good for controller players and PC players. Next up is the Hyper SMG. And this gun, I really liked it over the Thunderburst at the start, and now I hate it. Compared to the other guns in this loot pool, this gun is probably the worst. It has no range, where the Thunderburst has like really good range. I mean, no guns have good range anymore because of like bullet travel time, but in the sense of having good range this season, this gun has terrible range. When you get the mythic version of this gun, it's like pretty good, but if you're just using a normal version, it's really not that great. You have to be really close for it to do like consistent hits, and otherwise it does like 14 damage. So I'm gonna put it into bad because it's not necessarily a bad gun on its own, but in this meta, it is probably the worst gun aside from maybe the Enforcer AR, which we'll talk about in a little bit. Next up is the Striker AR, which is pretty much just your basic cookie cutter AR of this season. When the season first came out, this gun was definitely overpowered, and then they kind of nerfed it a little bit, and it's not as good. I mean, obviously that's what a nerf does, but I used to like it, and then I kind of stopped using it as much. I feel like it's not super reliable for long range, and the short clip size on it, which takes like ages to reload, is also not giving it any like benefits here. I've personally started using the Nemesis over the Striker AR just because I feel like it hits way more shots and it's way more reliable, and also because I land Grand Glacier every game and the mythic Nemesis AR is there, but that's beside the point. I'm definitely going to throw it into decent. It's definitely not a bad gun or anything. I just personally don't really like this gun. It's definitely like usable. You can definitely kill people with it. You can definitely win a game with it. Absolutely. In my opinion, it's just not super reliable past like 50 meters. And for that, I'm going to put it in decent. And then its sister, the Nemesis AR, is up next, which is my preferred AR this season. Although they're both balanced pretty much the same. ARs just aren't really good this season in general because the sniper is just completely busted. But in my opinion, the Nemesis AR outshines the Striker AR just a little bit because I feel like it's more consistent at hitting shots. This is just my personal opinion, but I'm going to put the Nemesis AR above the Striker AR, but they're both decent. I don't think either of the ARs this season are that great, really. They're all just kind of mid. They do what ARs are supposed to do, but since they introduced like bullet travel time and it's basically like impossible to shoot people out of the air now, ARs just aren't really what they used to be. Next up, we have the Enforcer AR, which is without a doubt the worst gun in the game, in my humble opinion, but also in most other people's opinion. I'm not gonna sit here and tell you this gun is useless. Like, if it was the only AR in the game, which would be a nightmare come to life, it would still be usable. Like, it's definitely a usable gun. If you want to pick it up and use it for whatever reason, you definitely can, and you can probably get a kill or two with it. But it's just slow to fire. It looks like a sniper, which is an infinitely better weapon in this meta. And for that, I am literally going to chuck it into Vault Please, because I think that is the most deserving weapon of this category. It is the only weapon in the game right now that I just absolutely want to see gone next season, and I really hope it gets either a massive buff or just vaulted. Next up is the Reaper Sniper Rifle, and you don't even need to hear me say this, but this is obviously the most overpowered weapon in the game, and it has been since the chapter started. This thing just has crazy bullet travel time, it has crazy damage. Even in zero build, it can one-shot headshot with all rarities. Like, it's going straight to S. This thing is just absolutely cooked. This weapon is just extremely overpowered on its own, but then you factor in the fact that we now have weapon attachments. You can put 4 different scopes on this thing, only one of which actually has sniper glare, which is stupid. There's another attachment that increases ADS speed, which makes it basically just a quick scoping machine. You can increase the reload time, and you can put a silencer on it so they have no idea where you're shooting them from. This thing is just cooked in all sense of the word, and it is the most deserving of S tier in this entire season, and I equally want it to stay and also get vaulted. So I guess we'll see what happens with it. And then we've got the Ranger pistol, which is pretty much just the default pistol of this season. They have to have one like every season just so I guess there's a pistol in the loot pool. And this season it's this pistol. So this thing is pretty decent. I would say it's like the most decent gun kind of in the meta. It's like equally really good, but also like really mid. It can definitely shred people. You can put a bunch of attachments on it. You can have a scope on it, which will make it super accurate. You can have a crazy fast reload speed. Like with attachments, this gun is definitely really good. It's not always a great substitute for an SMG in a lot of cases, and it's definitely not a replacement for an AR or sniper because the range on it is really just not that great. But if you do find yourself using one of these, you can definitely get a couple kills with it. I'm going to put it in the bottom of the decent tier below the ARs because I definitely wouldn't prefer to have the ARs over this, but I also would rather have this in my inventory than the Hyper SMG, so I think this is a pretty good spot for it. Now we've got the grapple blade, which is pretty much just the new mobility item of this season. It's very similar to like the ODM gear, if you guys remember that from chapter 4 season 2. It has a function where you can grapple forward to any surface, and it also has an attack feature, so you can, swing it at people and attempt to kill them, although it kind of sucks, so I wouldn't recommend doing that. It's a pretty great item for mobility though. If you don't have shockwave grenades, this is pretty much your only other option for mobility unless you're driving a car or something, I guess. And I guess flow berries can also give you some mobility, but this is like the only infinite mobility item this season, which instantly makes it like at least great tier. Having a mobility item that just never runs out is always great. I think like around here below the shotguns at the bottom of great tier is a pretty good spot for it. I just don't think it's as good as other mobility items we've had in the past. It can be sort of unreliable, especially when you're trying to escape from someone. So I think the bottom of great tier is a good spot for it. Next we have the Cluster Clinger. So this is like the only explosive in the game right now, I believe. I guess if you want to count the Anvil Launcher, that's like an explosive too, but that's not really new this season, so that's why I'm not ranking it. But the Cluster Clingers are honestly pretty broken. If you get one of these on someone, it's an easy like 150 damage pretty much every single time. The one downside I would say is that it doesn't break walls super well, so I wouldn't say it's S tier or anything, but it's a pretty great item. So I think somewhere in the middle of great tier about is where it belongs. One of the better explosive items we've had in the game for sure, but not quite S tier, I would say. Maybe in zero build it's a little bit better, but when I play builds and they can just kind of build to block it, it's not super good. It's also very easy to hit yourself with, but maybe that's just a skill issue. The ballistic shield. So I'm gonna be honest, I've never really used this thing. There have definitely been some like very quick instances where early game I'll pick it up because it's pretty much the only thing I have, but since I only play build mode, like I never really use this thing and I never really fight anyone using this thing either. I know in zero build, like tournaments especially, this thing is just a nightmare. People will just camp with this and it's just chaos. But coming from a builds player, I really don't care about this thing. It has no impact at all to the build meta, so like it really doesn't make a difference for me in any way. But seeing both sides of the coin, I know in zero build this would probably be an S item, but for builds it would be under Vault Please because it never sees any use and it's just kind of clogging the loot pool. So I think top of decent is a pretty good spot for it because it sort of balances out between zero build being S and build mode being Vault Please. If this was like just a zero build list, it would be S, and if it was just a build list, it would be at the bottom. But since we're counting both, I'm just going to chuck it there in the middle. Now I've got the new SUVs, like Trailblazers or Trail Smasher, I think is the official name, but it's just a car. I mean, that's all you need to know. I don't really have too much to say about it. It's a car. It has a lot of health. It goes pretty fast. It's good mobility. It's just a car. I mean, I don't really know what else I can say about it. I'm just going to chuck it in the decent tier. I guess the bottom of decent is a good spot for it. I mean, like, I'm fine with that. I'm fine with the car existing. Yeah, I don't know. It's a decent item. We love cars. Vroom vroom. Now, you may be wondering why I have medkits in big pots on this list, and that's actually because they were changed this season. So all meds were changed to where you could walk around and pop them, but the big pots and the medkits specifically also received another change where they sort of apply over time. So before it was like you would pop the full medkit, wait 10 seconds, and you get 100 health instantly, but now it's like slowly applying over time, like it'll do 2, 4, 6, or I don't really know what the exact values are, but over the course of 10 seconds, it'll like apply the health or shield to you. And this change has really helped these items. Like honestly, I've started carrying 3 medkits or 3 big pots over 6 minis now, just because they're so much better than they were before. Medkits especially in like competitive and stuff are just broken because you can out heal Storm, you can out heal like 10 tick zones with medkits now because it applies over time instead of you needing the full 10 seconds to pop it. So for that, I think the medkit belongs in S tier because the medkits low-key need a nerf. Like, I don't know how they would really nerf it, but I feel like they're a little too strong, especially for like zone camping and stuff. And the big pots I would put in great tier. They're definitely a great item as well. They're probably the best meds in the game, the big pots and the med kits. Minis kind of fell off. Never thought we'd be here, but the downfall of mini shield is real, guys. So they added a new like slurp slap sort of competitor, I guess you could say, this season, which is like flow. Like flow berries, flow. I don't really know like how fizzy jizz. I don't freaking know. Wait, no, I shouldn't say that. But flow berries anyway. You pop them. They give you 15 shield. They can splash your teammates as well, and it also gives you a low grab effect for a short period. So this is really good if you like combine them with shockwaves and stuff. But the healing part isn't super great, and for that I'm gonna put it into the bottom of great tier. I think the mobility factor is definitely great, but they're not super amazing healing items. So for that, I think great tier is a good spot for them. They're a good item. I like having them in the game, but they're just not super incredible. And then we have Flowberry Fizz, which is pretty much the exact same thing, except you shoot it up in the air and it gives you up to 100 shield. And it can hit all your teammates too, which is pretty funny. A lot of interesting jokes come from this item, which, you know, brings it up or down for some people. Up or down. See what I did there? It's definitely better than the regular Flowberries, so I think I'll put it somewhere in the middle of great tier. I think like around there is a good spot for it. Weapon attachments. I'm actually quite a big fan of these. I wasn't really sure at first because I felt like it was gonna overcomplicate like the loot pool and just make everything super complex, and it kind of did it first because like the names of everything are super weird based on their attachments. Stuff can be called like all-rounder or run and gun or whatever, and I still don't know what any of that means. Realistically, I don't really look at the attachments on my guns unless it's something that I'm like specifically putting on the gun. The only thing I really care about modding is the sniper rifle because you need to make sure it has like the best attachments on it. Overall, I'd say this is a pretty good feature. It was like the big defining feature of this chapter, I guess, for Battle Royale at least. And I would say it went pretty well. So I'm gonna put it probably around there in the great tier. I think it's a great addition to the game. Next up is the medallions, which these are essentially like mythic, something like a mythic material essentially that drops from killing bosses. It's like stored in your inventory but not in your 5 inventory slots, and it like passively heals you, and you heal more and quicker based on how many you have. So these were extremely broken at the start of the season. I think you only needed a single medallion to heal yourself all the way up to 100, which is just stupid. Like, that was dumb. I think 1 medallion now is like 50 and 2 is like 60 or something. And it goes up from there up to 100 when you have all 5. I'd say they're relatively balanced now. They're still kind of broken and like you still want to go for them, obviously. I mean, that's kind of what mythics are designed to do, is make you want to go get them. And it is obnoxious to have to snipe the same person like 4 times over just because they keep healing like over time. It is annoying, but it's also a mechanic that I'm okay with. I'd be fine with seeing them return next season, but I also wouldn't be mad if they were vaulted, if you know what I mean. In terms of this tier list though, I'm definitely going to put them in S tier because it's really good advantage whenever you have one and your opponent doesn't. Especially if you have 2 or more, it just becomes like exponentially harder to eliminate someone, especially if they have all 5. Like, good luck. The only way you're killing that person is if you get a headshot snipe. Now, this one is something you probably forgot existed, but it's the wall clambering mechanic, the wall climb mechanic. I don't even know what to call it. This thing is, I forgot this was even in the game, and it would not surprise me if you did too. This is something that allows you to like essentially just hold the jump button and it'll just like vault you up a vertical wall. Like, even if like it's 1,000 blocks tall, you'll still just go all the way to the top, which sounds really broken in theory, but I can't remember the last time I ever used this, and I don't think I've ever seen anyone else ever use this either. It's shown off to be like something that's like really impactful to the game, but it just didn't hit, I think, the way they were wanting it to. I can kind of see like what they were going for with it, but it kind of just it just didn't stick right. It's something that just like kind of exists in the background that you forget about, but it's like nice to have it when it's necessary, I guess. So I'll throw it into like bad, I guess. I'm not gonna put it into the vault, please, because I don't want them to like remove it. I think it's a fine thing to have in the game, but it's just kind of bad because it's so like forgettable and just unnecessary, I feel like. And now for the biggest disappointment of chapter 5, we have the train. This thing was like such a big highlight of like the trailer and like the teasers, and it was like, oh, all aboard the train is so sick, oh, you can like capture the loot on here, you're gonna have epic battles on it, and it's kind of like that sometimes, but really not really. It's a cool idea, and it's kind of a cool thing that it just goes around the island, you know, the way it does, but it also didn't really land super well, like the wall climbing mechanic. It's definitely better than the wall climb mechanic because you at least don't forget that it exists, you know, I guess that's something that's better than it. And, you know, you get decent loot on there. If you do land on there, you're gonna have some pretty good stuff. And, you know, if you have a fight on there, I'm sure you'll have a good time. And build, it like auto breaks all your builds, which is kind of an interesting way to go about it, but I mean, it's a cool addition to the game. I'm fine with it being there. It just didn't exactly hit as hard as I think Epic really wanted it to. I'll throw it at the top of decent, just because I think it's a good thing to have in the game, but it's not really, it wasn't all it was cracked up to be, you know? So moving into some of the seasonal events here, we first have Winterfest, everybody's favorite event that somehow gets worse every single year it happens. I don't know if like, this has got to be intentional at this point, right? That every single like season based event, like the summer event, the winter event, the Halloween event, they literally get worse every single time they happen, and I don't know how that's possible, but like somehow it keeps happening. This year I played maybe a couple games in Winterfest, and that was when the Icy Grappler was in it, so like right at the very start. I think for this they gave us some quests. The floating island changed into ice, and there was a snowball launcher, and I think that's pretty much it. Very exciting event, I know. And then the Icy Grappler was like busted where you could just go a million miles an hour, so they had to replace it with like the normal grappler or something. Honestly, I didn't even play the game when they replaced it for the normal grappler, so I didn't even ever get to use that. So just kind of a mess of an event all around, nothing too exciting going on with that. I'm definitely gonna put it into bad and like bottom of bad. Like, I don't know how the events get worse every time. Surely they can just like do something cool, but they just never do. And it's kind of impressive how they keep making it worse every year. Like, I don't know if that's their plan, like if they're trying to do that, but they're succeeding if that's what they're trying to do. And then we have the Solid Snake collab, which is obviously a collaboration with Metal Gear Solid. This update brought the return of cardboard boxes, but they were shinier this time. They were mythic instead of uncommon, even though they did the exact same thing. So that was cool. And we have yet another invisibility device. Like, what is this? Like, take 4 on this thing? Like, there was the Predators thing. There was the one in the jungle season. There's this one. Like, I swear they try this invisibility thing, like, once a year. And every time it just sucks. Like, it's never good. And to be fair, this iteration is definitely the best one we've ever seen. But it still sucks. So, like, it's a cool item. Don't get me wrong. But invisibility items never really do much. Like, there's definitely like the very specific situation where you're trying to run from a squad who just massacred your whole team, and you find a random invisibility thing with an empty slot in your inventory, and you pick it up and it helps you escape. You know, there is that. But other than that, this thing is pretty much useless. But overall, I mean, the collab was fine. Like, it's just a couple fun items, so nothing to really hate there. I'd say it's about just around there and decent. Like, I mean, it was nothing too special, but it's a cool collab nonetheless. And then we have the Cowabunga Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle collab. This was an event that was like actually not terrible. We had like 4 mythic weapons, even though they all kind of did the same thing, but they were like the nunchucks and the staff of the Ninja Turtles. I don't really watch Ninja Turtles, so forgive me if I mess any lore info up here. And we had pizza coming back, which, I mean, pizza's busted, so I guess that's cool. And there was also the hoverboards as well, which hoverboards are sick. That's probably like my favorite vehicle ever in this game, so love that. They did have a battery this time, but I mean, it didn't really affect me too much. You never really drive one long enough without it like blowing up or something to use all the battery, so not really too big of an issue there. Love that thing, great for trick shots, especially with the Reaper sniper rifle being in the game. Like, just undefeated combo. I'd say this event was in the great tier. It was definitely better than the other events we had this season, miles better than Winterfest, but is that really saying that much? I don't know. I also wanted to sort of review the new game modes a little bit, talk about them, how I feel about them being in Fortnite, so that's why they're on here. We of course got LEGO Fortnite, Fortnite Festival, and Rocket Racing all brand new this season. And up first is LEGO Fortnite, which I don't know about this one. It was really fun right off the rip. And it still is a fun game. It's a great game, I think, but it sort of got like really boring really quick. Like, I don't know if you guys watched my like series on it, quote unquote, where I made 2 whole episodes. We tried filming like a 3rd one, and it was so hard to like figure out something to do that wasn't just harvesting resources. I felt like all we were doing was just getting materials for stuff, and it just felt like so just tedious and boring. So we kind of gave up on that. I'm sure it'll return in the future, and if you guys really want us to play it, then we can do some more LEGO Fortnite videos too. But for right now, that series is on an indefinite hold. I'm sure we'll come back eventually when it gets more updates and stuff, but for now, at least, it's on hold. And it has a lot of potential. You know, it's similar to Minecraft where it has like tons of content that could potentially be made around that. But until it gets like really refined, I think right now it's kind of in like a beta state, you could say. It's not incredible. It gets boring kind of easily. So I'll chuck this one at the bottom of great tier because I think it is a great game mode, like truly, and it has a lot of potential. But at the moment, it's kind of just in its infancy and not too much excitement going on there. Unless you like, you know, harvesting resources, I guess. Fortnite Festival is up next, which is probably my favorite of the new game modes. It's definitely the one I play the most. Once it gets later in the night and you're kind of tired of playing Battle Royale, you know, people be sweaty past like midnight, believe it or not. It's a nice thing to just wind down and just sort of compete against your friends or, you know, just play along with your friends and talk about whatever. It's a nice chill game mode. Definitely my favorite of the 3. And honestly, it has a really promising future with like collabs. We've already had The Weeknd and Lady Gaga. Pretty high grade tier is a good spot for it. Definitely my favorite of the game modes. Seems to be the most popular out of the community from what I can tell, and it has a really promising future as well. And then last but not least, or I mean maybe least if you want to think about it like that, is Rocket Racing. This is by far my least played of these new game modes, and I think the community also doesn't really play this one too much. There's definitely some dedicated people to it. My boy DJ Legendary is like champion ranking this, I think. He's a grinder for sure. But for most people, it's not really too alluring of a game mode. It's definitely fun. I've gotten to gold rank. It's a fun game mode to play, especially with friends. It's a good time. But especially from my experience, the grind to gold was just awful because the game would refuse to give me like any varying maps. I got the same map probably like 20 matches in a row, and it was the worst thing ever. But overall, it's a good game mode. It also has a promising future depending on what they add, and I think it's a great addition to Fortnite. The bottom of decent tier is where I'm going to put it, which sounds kind of harsh, but I think that's a good spot for it where it is right now compared to the other game modes. So this is going to be my final ranking of everything that was added this season. Let me know what you think. Would you change any of these things around? What weapons would you put higher? What would you put lower? Did you have fun during Winterfest? That's another question I'd like to know. Apologies with the lack of uploads recently. I have been busy with school and some other things, but my plan is in season 2 to increase the upload frequency for you guys, so look forward to that. Also, go check out my Big Bang event review if you haven't already. It's a pretty good video and I spent a lot of time on it, so I'd appreciate it if you give it a watch, give it a thumbs up, leave a comment, but otherwise, I will see you guys next season. Peace out.